agree with you. Um, anyway, so I'm gonna jump in.
So I know that Vic is not able to make it tonight, and
I think Erica's traveling also.
Erica's traveling, and Karen, or they ended up with a meeting. So it's going to be a smaller crowd this week.
Okay.
But it's going to be just as beautiful.
Okay, so we're up to the fifth commandment, which is to honor your parents. And before I give any explanation, I'd love to hear from any of you why you think that, or where does honoring our parents come into our relationship? Like, how does that play into our relationship? Any thoughts? Saskia, you could go again if you want.
I have plenty of thoughts. Sure. Well, let's think about that for a little here. I mean,
obviously, it was written before the Freudian sense of, I forgot what that's called. You know what I'm talking about? That Freudian thing. Like you marry your father, or you marry your mother.
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way you do. I mean, and if you're Jewish, and in a way you do. So I can understand that correlation,
Yeah. So I'm going to say a few things. Honoring your parents is actually, it's a very middle of the road kind of thing, because either way could be too extreme. So first of all, the one extreme could be, you know what, I can't wait to leave my parents' home. I needed them until a certain point. Now I'm getting married and moving on. I don't need them anymore. I don't have to have anything to do with them. Like, the past is the past. And we just want to, some people want to just have a clean slate and just put all their energy into their new relationship and into their marriage, and don't really want to, they have maybe hard feelings towards their parents from some of the childhood stuff that came up, or that was in their things that were hard or difficult in their childhood that might have caused resentment or frustration. They're looking forward to just moving over and starting a new relationship and moving on from their parents. I don't want to have anything to do with them. They hurt me. And what's interesting is that I'm saying also from my own experience and from my own healing and growing, is that when we have hurt towards our parents, which is common and it happens, but we don't resolve it, and we think that, you know what, we're just going to start a new fresh start, a new relationship. I'm going to put all my investment in my spouse, and not focus on my parents anymore. We don't realize how much it affects our relationship, because when we have hurt from anyone, but especially our parents who raised us and who were the ones who journeyed us to our adult life, and who were the first higher powers in our life to guide us and teach us about life, we end up, if we're hurt, then we put a lot of walls around our heart to protect us, and we lose trust, or we feel like we need to be really independent, and we try to do things ourselves, or we have a hard time being vulnerable, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's so many things to it. And why honoring our parents is such an important part of our journey towards building a really healthy relationship with our spouse, is because the fact is, like Saskia, you said, a lot of times, whether we want to or not, we oftentimes do marry people who have very similar traits to at least one of our parents, because it's what's familiar. It's like, it's energetically what we're attracted to. It's what's comfortable for us. And it's really, I myself went through a journey where I didn't even realize the layers of how much healing I needed to do around my mother and my father, and how much each layer of facing my relationship with my parents and things that I thought I could move on and just ignore and it's in the past, but facing it and resolving it and working it through, it literally opened up layers to my heart. And it enabled me to have more emotional intimacy and more trust and more communication and build a healthier and healthier and healthier relationship. So the fact is that our parents have more effect on our subconscious and our inner world and on our emotions than we care to think. And it's vital if we have blockages with our spouse, so much facing the stuff with our parents and healing that actually opens up and opens the channel for a healthier relationship. So that's one thing. The other thing about honoring our parents is, of course, also honoring our in-laws. And, you know, it's so funny because it's so easy for us, maybe we could like roll our eyes about our parents and be like, oh, they're so frustrating, they're so this and they're so that. But when it comes to our spouse, if our spouse talks negative about our parents, it always comes from a very different kind of connotation, or, you know, because our spouse, or let's say us, to, you know, looking at our in-laws, we might see flaws in our spouse, and then we go to our in-laws home and we're like, oh my gosh, this is where it comes from. You're exactly like your dad, you know, you see it, all the same things, like I see where it comes from. And then we might like get upset at our in-laws and frustrated and be like, look how he talks and look how your mom says this and this and this, and this is where you get your stuff from. And it doesn't help their relationship. It actually, even if our spouse themselves maybe struggles with their parents and needs validation and support and talks things through, for us to make fun of their parents is always going to be hurtful, and it doesn't help. And it's usually coming from criticism towards our spouse. So that's a really important thing.
If I can jump in and add something that was very, it only began to make much more sense for me as the years have gone on. But when I was a kid, my father used to say all the time, you know, we used to, as kids do, you know, you're the worst father in the world and you destroyed my life, and all the regular things that kids say. And my father used to say something that at the time I hated it, and it used to make me so upset, but I see exactly what he means now, what he meant then, but I see it now, is he'd say, I would mess up my kids. I'm going to mess up my kids the way I mess them up, and you're going to mess up your kids the way you're going to mess them up. And what he meant to say was, I'm going to do the best I can, and you're going to do the best you can. And it's something about when I think about honoring my parents and honoring your parents, is honoring that they did the best they could, and you're doing the best you can. So by accepting that you're doing the best you can, you're respecting what they did, and you're respecting your process that you're doing the best you can. You know, and I think that that's an important thing, is because so much in our lives, we're so hard on ourselves. Oh, I'm a bad parent. I tried. I messed up, and you know, whatever. And you know, we say, if only my parents would have. But if we put ourselves in our parents' shoes, our parents probably did the best they could, no matter how flawed they were. And we have to be nice to ourselves and appreciate that we're doing the best we can as well.
That's very true. And I wanted to now say from a different angle with honoring our parents, that honoring our parents means we have to understand what does it mean to honor our parents and what it's not. Because, you know, of course, like I said, we could go one extreme where we totally disown them and we have nothing to do with them. But we could also go the opposite extreme, which is beyond what honoring our parents mean. So, you know, for example, oftentimes, like we have a very, you know, let's say enmeshed or codependent relationship with our parents where we feel really responsible for them. And, you know, maybe our parents are struggling with something, or like, you know, emotionally really needing us to be emotionally connected to them. And we've taken that on as a child. And even after we get married, we feel like that burden or that responsibility, like, you know, I'm my mom's caretaker, or my dad, or, you know, they really need that emotional connection with me, and I need to constantly check in, and I need to speak to them every day to make sure they're okay. Or, you know, to an extreme where it's like, oh my gosh, this is what my parents want in my spouse, and this is my parents' expectation of our relationship. Or, what we need to do or how we need to work or how we need to operate. And so we're so still emotionally invested as it, like, still in this child mode of making our parents happy and getting their approval, that we might even not be able to really accept our spouse the way they are, because of course they come from a totally different home, different background, different, you know, they're going to see things and experience things differently because they were raised differently. But sometimes we have a hard time really moving forward beyond our parents and our childhood and building this new kind of connection, new kind of way of operating with our spouse and learning a new way, because we're subconsciously afraid of getting our parents' approval and still caught up in doing it for our parents versus being the adult and moving forward. So I just want to say, like, honoring our parents means respecting them, gratitude. They were the one who brought us to this world. They raised us. So calling them when we can, checking in, you know, saying Shabbat Shalom when we can, and being loving and just really having that gratitude and accepting them for where they are, but not to the point that we're emotionally feeling responsible for them or where it takes away from our relationship. And most important, like, that we don't live for our parents' approval, but that we move forward as adults and say, like, this is my spouse, this is me, this is the way our new home is going to be. And maybe my parents don't understand, but it's okay. We're our own people. And it's really important to move forward, because changing ourselves for our parents' approval, that's not honor. That's something completely different. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's important, you know, to know the difference. Any thoughts or feedback on that? Okay. So we're going to move forward to the next one, which is do not murder. This is always an interesting one, even when we talk about the 10 Commandments. Like, why does it say, you know, don't murder? Well, how many of us, thank God, are murderers? You know, unfortunately, there are murderers in this world. And, you know, in the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years, there's, you know, sadly, there's been a lot of more stories of murders and school shootings and all kinds of things. But, you know, when we're talking about the mass, most of us are not murderers, but yet it's on the 10 Commandments. And, you know, the 10 Commandments are like the foundational Jewish structure and laws. So what does it have to do with us? So actually murder, you know, on a just straight out translation is don't kill. But on a deeper level, emotionally and spiritually, what it's referring to is not to murder someone's spirit. And because it's interesting when we think about it, you know, we all, anyone who's alive, they exist, right? You see their body, they're getting up every day, they're walking around. Hi, Karen, welcome. They're walking around, they're doing, you know, you could see their body. But when someone spiritually and emotionally have been murdered, as in, like, you know, spiritually wounded and put down and shamed and judged and, like, disrespected, they exist, but they're not really alive. You know, you could go through a whole life where you're existing and your body is there, but you're like a robot, where you're so disconnected from your emotions and so disconnected from your spirit and from your passion that you're not really alive. So that's what it means, don't murder. And of course, and now we're talking about our spouse, how much more so when we say don't murder, it's saying don't kill their spirit, don't kill their soul, don't kill their heart.
Don't squash them. Yes.
And what does that mean? Like, any shame or criticism or disrespect, like, how can you do that? And who are you? And what's wrong with you? And, like, you know, especially, you know, it's so sad because the way the world has been operating, it's like we want to put on this, like, big show for the rest of the world, you know, these huge smile, like the mailman comes, it's like, hello, everything's great. And then you slam the door and be like, what's wrong with you? You know, it's just like, we'll have all the time and the patience and the big smile for outside, but who's more important? Like, how could the other people be more important than our own spouse, you know? And it really, really does murder people's spirit when we shame them. So when it says don't murder, it's like, don't act in a way that will hurt your spouse's spirit. And even when we don't realize, like, even if we think, oh, whatever, my spouse just talks the way, I don't care. We do. We need our spouse's approval. We need their love. We need to know that they respect us and they care about us, and they're supposed to be the person that builds us up the most. And the opposite of that is really building them up. And we talked about this last week, but I just want to say also, connecting to Rosh Hashanah and, you know, the pomegranate, like why we eat a pomegranate, because a pomegranate inside has tons, is full of fruit, of seeds. And it's unique from all the other fruit, because most fruit is just mostly fruit, and a pomegranate's full of seeds. And the message is that each one of us, like, inside is full of infinite goodness, and we have so much passion and wisdom and goodness inside of us, but it has to be peeled open. It has to be nourished. It has to be built up. And when we could go a whole life that we don't even realize all the seeds that we have inside of us, all the goodness, and if we're squished and we're not recognized, and we don't have cheerleaders like building us up, we're emotionally dead. So it's like we're murdered.
I just want to add in one thing, something which it's interesting how I think I may have said this last week as well, is the longer you're married, the more you learn about your relationship. And just the other day, I was preparing stuff for the Rosh Hashanah, what I'm going to share at the service, and Nahama and I were talking, and she said to me, she's like, you know what, this type of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. She said, I don't relate to that that topic. She and Nahama tends to be someone who's goes deeper into things and looks for the root core bottom of whatever the subject is. I tend to be more on the outer, fluffy, emotional side of things. And Karen's laughing because she understands. She sees this part of us. And when, in the earlier parts of our relationship, it was the reaction, whether it was Nahama or me sharing something, it would, Nahama would share something and I'd be like, that's bad. Don't say it. Don't share that. And, or vice versa. She'd be like, no, that's bad because it's just too simple. It's too fluff. and on some level, I never felt murdered literally, but it's the ability we have is to celebrate our spouse and to say, you know what, that's part of marriage. And this will actually tie into the next one, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but is celebrating who our spouse is. They're a different person, but they're part of you, and celebrate them. Building them up is, I see that more as a parental role, and I see celebrate them and recognize that they have a lot of gifts that you don't have, and you have gifts that they don't have, and celebrate each other together.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's like we all want our spouse to be confident and happy and passionate and excited and truly alive, and we literally have so much power, more power, especially us women, the wives. We literally have so much, the way we look at our spouse, the way we think about them, even if the things we don't say, but the way it's subconscious, energetically, the way we view our spouse, that's how they view themselves, literally. If we're criticizing them and focusing on the negative, they think that they judge themselves that way. And we don't want our spouse to look negative about themselves and feel not spiritually alive. So if we're feeling negative and we feel judgmental or critical, we have to work on that and really work hard on everyone has positive things, and on switching our mindset and working on the positive things, because that literally builds up our spouse. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one.
Any questions before we go on to the next one? Okay.
Got me there.
Yeah, but
What did you say?
I said you got me there.
Okay.
Okay. So go. We can say those of you. There's a couple of people who are listening on the phone. Feel free to text Nahama if you have questions as well. So going on to the next of the Ten Commandments, which is, I'm trying to think of how you say it in the Hebrew. It's be faithful, or don't commit adultery. There we go. That's in English, but you know, the known version is don't commit adultery. So obviously on a simple level, that's pretty simple. Don't commit adultery. Don't cheat on your spouse. But if we look at this in a little bit of a deeper way, what does it mean to cheat on your spouse? Or what does it mean to be committing adultery in your marriage? Very often, you know, one of the biggest challenges in marriages nowadays, one of the things you hear very often is, I fell out of love. I've been married, we fell out of love, we grew apart, we grew distant. We're no longer in that exciting stage of our relationship. The Torah perspective is very different. Is that what is that stage of life when you were in love that you could fall out of? That is on some level lust. Now, lust in the traditional sense is chasing after inappropriate things. But in a relationship, you could have lust, which is the relationship which isn't based on core and based on who you really are at your core. A lot of the relationships that happen, that take place nowadays, is, oh my gosh, he made me feel so good. He bought me jewelry. She was so sweet, and she looked pretty, and she dressed well, and blah blah blah. But all of that stuff dies out after, ask any woman, you have kids, and you don't feel so pretty anymore, and you feel, you don't feel like any of your clothing fit, and you feel like you're a wreck. And after you get married, in the beginning, he was buying this and buying jewelry. I mean, I know that I bought more jewelry in the first year of marriage than I bought in the next 14 years combined, probably. So there's a certain lust and excitement and joy that's happening in the beginning. But as time goes on, that begins to fade away. And that's really when the relationship begins. Some people, it happens in the beginning. Some people, it happens after a year. Some people, it happens after 10 years. And some people, it happens after a week. Because you're now living as a couple, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, everything that I thought was okay or was a joke is now real. It's real life. And being faithful and not committing adultery means at that point, you're staying true to who you married. I married you. I don't know why I'm attracting flies today, and they're all, okay, it's gone. Sorry about that. Staying true to the relationship that you got started with, as long as that core is still part of who you are, then your relationship has foundation. But if the second the relationship and the lust, so to speak, fades away, and you don't begin to enter into the love stage, and lust is about, what can I get? How can I get from you? Love is, how can I give to you? And I remember thinking, like, how is love about giving? Well, another example that always happens is when I buy Nechama flowers, I like, personally, don't buy me flowers, but if I were to be decorating a house, I would decorate my house with a dozen of red roses. One type of rose, red. And Nechama would get like a dozen roses plus a dozen lilies and daffodils, and mix them all together and make sure that there are a whole bunch of colors, and make sure, and I don't like it. But love is about giving to her what she wants. Lust or the taking part is about giving to her what I want because it makes me feel good. And so not committing adultery means not taking and running off with yourself, but giving and being there for the other person. Want to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I would just say, just to add a little point, is that when like as you said, when the lust fade goes away, it could happen that a person could start panicking and being like, you know, we could be addicted to lust. You know, there's so many things in life that are addictive, and lust is one of them. Like the high, the dopamine, oh my gosh, I feel so good, it's so exciting, someone's giving me attention and looking at me. And because it feels so good, because it's like a drug, you know, and we're chasing it our whole life, that when we don't have it, we could start panicking and being like, oh my gosh, okay, this is my relationship, it doesn't have it, so now I need to search, I need to get my high and my dopamine fix elsewhere. But like my relationship is my relationship. But so and that's where it really kicks in, to like notice that and to be like, actually that's addictive. That's just a high. Like if it's going away, it means that I'm ready to like move forward and mature up, grow up, you know, and really delve into what's real.
The kids are.
Huh? Kids are crying?
Yeah, they're not going to sleep.
Oh
I'll
man.
be right back.
Okay. I'm gonna move forward. I'm just gonna pull up my notes. The next one is don't steal, which is interesting because we don't really, I hope most spouses don't steal from their spouse. I don't know what we would steal from each other. But of course, as we go through it, you see like everything is on a much deeper emotional, spiritual meaning when you delve into it. And I think this is actually so profound. What I was saying before about like, you know, we'll smile for the mailman, but then like scream at our spouse the second the door closes. So when it says like, don't steal, it's like our spouse on a basic level, forget that they're our spouse and they should come first and they should get the best of us. But on a very basic human level, they deserve to be treated like a mensch, you know, and like the basic, just like everybody else. So it's like, don't steal what they deserve, you know, like, oh, it's my, like, you know, your spouse comes and helps with the kids, or, you know, I'm a woman, so I'm going to talk about the husband. Sorry. But, you know, your husband comes in and helps you cook dinner, or your wife comes and helps you with whatever it is. Oh, it's only my spouse. I don't need to help them. Like, I mean, I don't need to thank them. That's basics. Like, duh. Like, that's your job, you know? I mean, but they're a human just like anyone else, and don't steal their, like their thanks. They deserve to be thanked and respected, you know? Don't steal their ability to like, to be a mensch with them. And like, it's really thinking about, it's like, whatever any human being on a basic level deserves, my spouse deserves it too. So I don't have like a tremendous amount to say on that, but I that's my main point that I wanna bring up. I just wanna see if I, yeah, and the other thing is like the same concept, but you know, our spouse needs our heart. You know, they want our vulnerability. They want our emotional intimacy with us, and don't steal that from them either. Like sometimes it's hard to really open up and give them our heart. You know, it's so scary. There's so many levels of like walls that we put up our whole life to be really truly intimate, to be really truly vulnerable, to really trust another person. But you know, the biggest gift we could give our spouse is our heart, is our truth, and trusting them with our true self. And sometimes we're like, you know, it's too much. Like, I'll give you only a quarter of myself, but like, I can't give you my all. Like, you know, this is too much, too private. But they married you. They want you. They want your whole you. So don't steal from them the honor and the privilege to know your whole you, and to not hold back. And to, even if it's scary, then it's a process of learning to open up. But you know, the more you don't hold back and you learn to trust and you have communication, it's a gift for both of you. We're up to you.
Up to number 9. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is don't bear false witness. So this is generally in when it comes to testimony in court, that if you're called in to testify about something, don't lie. As simple as that. On a simple level, on a very, it's funny because I was, just before I get into this, I was thinking last week was so much more positive You know, and this week is all the don'ts. And it's interesting if you look at the Ten Commandments. Generally when you'll see them in the tablet format, the right-hand side is all the do's and the left-hand side is all the don'ts. And so Judaism is not negative, but it's you know, maybe you could say it's equal, but Judaism is all about really do's and don'ts, but not don'ts in a way of, you know, you know, people, you know, somebody said to me recently that they're like, you know, oh, keeping kosher, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it's not, you know, if we look at it as a whole bunch of things you can't do, then yes, Judaism becomes a burden. But if you look at things as, you know, do's and instead of don'ts, but ways to protect yourself and ways to keep yourself on the right path. So instead of looking at these as don't, you know, don't this, don't that, look at these as opportunities to strengthen and put parameters or put fences around keeping yourself in a healthy way. So this one is don't bear false witness. What does bearing false witness in a marriage look like? And I'm going to pull back up my notes here. And I think the word for it nowadays in current terminology is passing. When somebody acts like somebody else, you're passing. Am I saying that right? Or maybe it's used when a black person, you know, acts like a white person, they're passing as a white person. I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing up some things, but is be true to who you are. Very often we want to be somebody to ourselves. We want to be somebody. You know, I want to be like the neighbor. I want to be the person who has the CEO of some company. I want to be like that person. So we keep trying and trying and trying. We dress like people who are not really who we are, but who we want to be. But when it says don't bear false witness, what he's saying is be authentic, be who you are, be real. And when you're real, the walls that are around you come down, and that's when you can truly have a real relationship. And it's not only be real to your spouse. Of course, you have to be honest and you have to be true to who you are as a couple. And yes, when you dated, when you got married, you had a certain image of who you are, but be real. It says when Jacob married, he wanted to marry Rachel, but he ended up marrying Leah. And some of the commentaries explain that what essentially Rachel and Leah for Jacob was essentially one person, but at two different stages. Obviously, in reality, it was two different people. But his intention was to marry Rachel, the softer, more meek, more simple of the two sisters. He married Leah, who was the more powerful and the more wild and the more of a chevraman, you know, the more the one with much more personality and more energy. And so he had to adjust and realize that he was married to somebody who he didn't realize, who he didn't recognize, but eventually they grew together as a couple. And it's important for us in our relationships to do the same thing. We came in with who we are or who we wanted to be. But as time goes on, we need to take down the walls that are around us, take down the things that are separating us, and grow into who we really are. And as we grow into who we really are, then our spouses can actually be true, because now they know who they're dealing with. Up until now, they were dealing with you with your walls up. But when you take down your walls and you live authentically with who you are, then they can live authentically, because they can be on an equal and level playing field.
Yeah, I just want to add that, you know, another dimension to this that might make it more complicated is sometimes we actually want to be authentic and we want to be our true self, but sometimes our spouse actually wants to put us in a certain, you know, box, or expect a certain, you know, result from us, or maybe doesn't initially really understand our authentic self. So might, you know, judge it or be like, what's going on? And, you know, why are you behaving this way? And we know that's authentic to us. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of inner strength, but it's really, initially it might seem like I can't be this way because my spouse doesn't respect that, or they doesn't get it, or it's causing marriage issues because, you know, my spouse likes me better when I behave this way. But if that's not your authentic self, again, even if there's resistance initially, if you push forward and you know that, you know what, my spouse doesn't understand yet or doesn't agree, but I'm committed to showing up authentically in the relationship, and you push through and you communicate and you say, yeah, you know, you might not understand this, or maybe, you know, when we got married, I was a certain way, but I didn't know my authentic self, you know, and now I'm evolving and like, I'm discovering that this is really what's important for me, or this is who I truly am, or I'm evolving, you know, and you do it anyways, because even if it feels like it's not good for the shalom bayit or it's causing more, you know, tension, if you push through and you're committed to it and you do it with compassion, love, and say, I know this is different. I know ultimately it's the biggest gift, because sometimes there's resistance because the spouse is afraid of change, or maybe your authentic self is causing them to face their authentic self, which is scary for them, and they want to stay in the old pattern, or it's more familiar to them, but ultimately their soul wants your authentic you, and it's a gift to them because it mirrors to them maybe more growth, and to push through and to know that no matter what, it's always better for any relationship to be authentic, even if it's going to be rocky along the way. And the last is do not be jealous. And this is an interesting one, because why would we be jealous of our spouse? But it does happen. And it's so interesting. And you know, when would we be, sometimes we don't even realize that we're jealous of our spouse, but it could be small little things like, you know, let's say you work so hard all day and then your spouse comes, let's say you're both working, right? And you come back and your spouse pulls off their shoes, they're relaxing, sitting on the couch, drinking a beer, watching TV, like all's well, and you're still going and going and going, and you're like, what's wrong with you? You know, it's like, it actually could bring up jealousy. Like, why can you just come in and just chill and like be done and I never end? Or like, maybe your spouse is like really outgoing and has tons of friends and talking to friends all the time and hanging out, and maybe you're more introverted or don't have a big social life, and it's like, why are you always talking to your friends? Why are you always hanging out? You always have where to go, and not me, you know? Or, you know, the list could go on. I mean, but it is important to recognize that it is possible to be jealous of our spouse, and maybe we don't pinpoint it as jealousy, but it's this feeling of resentment, of like frustration or resentment in something they're doing. And if it's coming up, it's a reason. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you and you should like push it away and be like, oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing, or like there's something wrong with me. No, it's coming up because it's an opportunity for you to recognize in yourself. So for example, to bring that first example, if your spouse is always really knows how to chill and you really don't, and you're always moving along, and the second there's some crumbs on the floor, you're sweeping up, and you know, an email pops in and you're like, oh, I have another email, and you're just going, and your spouse is really chill and you're constantly frustrated. Deeper than that, maybe you're jealous because you really wish that you knew how to chill too. And your spouse is so good at relaxing and you're terrible at it, and you're always going. And you think you want to change that in your spouse because it's like, why aren't you, you know, stepping up and working harder? But they're actually living the life that you really want. And so if you're jealous, that's to look in yourself, inside yourself, and I don't need to change my spouse. Maybe it's because I really wish that I had that. So what can I do to relax more? Maybe I need more help. Maybe I need to relax more and be less perfectionist. Maybe, you know, maybe there's certain specific things that I can ask him in a really, or her in a really clear way for specific things that I need. But again, or like the example of your spouse always going out and hanging out with friends, like we could try to squish them and be like, stay home more, and you're always going out and you're always having fun. I mean, if they're always with their friends and never spending time with you, that's an extreme, and that's not healthy, and there needs to be balance. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about assuming there's a good relationship and you nurture your relationship, but they just have a great social life, then great. Like, back to don't murder them, like support them and cheerlead them and say, look, I could see you're so happy when you hang out with your friends. That's beautiful. Like, I want friends too, And like, what do you need to do to give that to yourself? So that's my main message. Like, if you're feeling jealous or resentful, you really need to look inside yourself and say, how can I give this to myself more? Because it's obviously something I'm craving. And if we crave something, then we deserve it. But we are the only ones who can actually be our own like shepherd into bringing us to where we want to be and to giving ourselves what we want and we desire. And we have to make those changes, and we have to know that we're worthy of it and we deserve it, and take the time to notice those things and to figure out what we can do to bring those changes into our life, that we have the things that we really want.
So I just want to add in one more thing on that. There's a famous joke that there's 2 rules in marriage. The first rule is that your wife is always right. The second rule is when she's wrong, refer back to rule number 1. But I think that, when you get to the 10th of the 10 commandments, we have to always refer back to commandment number 1 is that, which is, I am the Lord your God. And as Nahama was talking, it kind of reminded me of this point, is that with everything else that's going on, when it comes to working with our spouse, we have to always remember that God is the one who's in charge. And when we're in a situation and we're feeling this jealousy from our spouse, or we're feeling uncomfortable in our relationship, always remember that Hashem, that God has He has the marriage. It says that there's three parts of the 3 parts that make up a child, is the husband, the wife, and God. That you need all 3 to create a child, and that's why scientifically we haven't been able to create a human embryo, because it is the true essence of godliness. And we have to remember, when we're sitting there in our relationship and we're struggling, obviously we have to look inside ourselves and look inside what it is that's coming up for us, but look in even deeper and know God has this handled. And if we fall back on God, then God will pick us up and allow us to move forward healthily in a stronger partnership.
Yeah. Wow, look, we finished within the hour. Pretty impressive. We don't like talking about don'ts. We only like talking about do's. So last time we talked more.
What thoughts and questions or anything might you guys have?
Not to call on you
Well,
guys.
I think this is great. This is really, really, this is really good. This is really helpful to me. Mordecai just got here, but I wish you were here for that whole thing. So it's being recorded, so you can see it.
Yeah, I'll send it out.
We'll send it out. But yeah, this is great for marriage, but these rules are for every single relationship. Friendships, siblings, children, parents, neighbors, the works. These are like fundamental rules that really, really, really help in every relationship. Like, I'm thinking like jealousy, you're jealous of a friend, or you notice someone, you're jealous of them. It's like human nature to either harp on that jealousy or to shame ourselves and be like, I can't, stop being jealous, like get over it, But actually deeper than that, it's like, I'm jealous. Okay, that means that I'm desiring something. Like, that means that I want change. Like, there's something, it's not that I need to be that person or that I want everything that they have, but it's like, what is something that I want in my relationship or in my life that they have, that like I could aim for or strive for. And like, it could be actually flipped into a very positive thing. If it's turned into the right way.
It seems like a lot of, it takes a lot of real conscious effort, to what's the word, to exercise these ideas.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it really does. It's a real deliberate effort.
So somebody once told me, if you don't have times in your marriage that you argue, either your spouse is a deadbeat, and so you have no relationship, or you're not married. And the reality is that, when you have two human beings coming together, you're two different people who grew up in different households and different worlds, in some level. And it's going to take work. And I remember before I got married, I was like, oh yeah, I can get married. It's going to be great. And, my relationship's going to be perfect because, everybody else's relationships I had an opinion on, and I didn't understand why they could, why they have issues, but I'm not going to have any struggles. And then you get married and you're like, oh my gosh, she's somebody else. And so every marriage does take work and does take effort into keeping it strong and growing. But the more you put in the effort, the healthier and happier you do become. Tamara, you wanted to ask something.
Yeah. First off, thank you. This has been great. I am recently married as of the last few months, and my husband is studying for the bar exam, so it's coming up in a few weeks, so that's what he's doing. But he should be watching. I will show him the recording. But my question to you is, you've been together now, what you said, 14, 15 years. So have you mastered all this? Obviously, clearly you're saying that it takes constant work, but what kind of practice or things do you guys do to keep yourselves constantly reflecting and doing better, or does it just come naturally with time?
Well, that's a really, really.
I'm going to say I think we reflect maybe a little bit too much. Is that we're always, and we're always evaluating and checking in with how our relationship is doing. And I don't mean that literally that all day we're sitting there, but we're constantly doing some sort of check-in and saying, how are we doing? Are we spending enough time? Are we showing our love for each other? One of the things that Judaism provides is the concept of the mikvah. The mikvah, for those that it's the ritual bath. And what the ritual bath does is it forces you to have a period of time where you're separated from intimacy, from physical intimacy, to allow you to have a relationship where you can connect more on a verbal level. And so you're talking, you're not touching, and you're not, there's all physical touch is separated. So everything is forced to be communicative. And then you have the period of time where you are connected. So you can have more of a physical intimacy and more of a physical relationship. So that forces you to have that space to reflect. But regardless of where you are in your life, the taking the time, going on date nights, God willing, you'll have children, but this goes for those that have children, of course, as well, that have children already, is that we sometimes get so consumed in the day-to-day of life. I know the past, it's shocking to me that COVID has been, I think it's 7 months already, or 8 months already. That it's shocking to me that it's been that long, because when you have kids, you don't have the time to think about every day. The sunrise, the sunsets, it's going. The only thing I realized differently in the sun is that we had the fires. So I was like, oh, today it looks like the sun didn't rise. But other than that, there's always something going on every day. But if you don't take the time during that time to stop and say, let's check in, you know, whether it's, you know, and I think I may have said this last week as well. There's, I think I did say it. There's, you know, there's checking in once a day. There's checking in once a week. There's checking in once a month. There's different forms of checking in to find that time to connect. I think that that's a big piece.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, just in case anyone doesn't know so much about the mikvah, that it's like basically 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on every month, just to clarify that. I also want to say, for me personally, to answer what you asked, Tamar, I think it's a great question. I will say that our relationship has absolutely deepened and blossomed and grown over the past 15 years, thank God. And I think specifically because we're both very passionate, intense people, like it hasn't been like, really, you know, it's like we get down to the bottom of things because we're both very committed to that, and we're both very authentic and communicative kind of people. So we're really like hash things out till the end. And, you know, sometimes it feels like, I mean, I could imagine some people might be like, oh, it's not worth it. It's too complicated. It's taking too much energy. Let's just like go to bed and move on. But I will say for Ezzy and I, we've always been, for better or for worse, really hash things out till the end. And I have seen that it has really helped us continue to blossom and grow our relationship, because we're able to move forward on things because we've got down to the bottom of so many different things. And for me personally, what's really helped me in the past few years in our relationship is trusting the process and relaxing in the process, and realizing, just like in our own personal lives, there's times where we feel really strong and really great and really, you know, confident and clear. And there's times that we feel like in a total mess and like could barely, you know, take on the day. It's the same thing in relationships. We can't, it's not like that we're doing something wrong or that we could avoid it, or if we change, all relationships have their ebbs and flow, and it's totally natural. There will be times when we're so connected and just totally flowing on the same page, like really loving and really compassionate to each other. And, you know, it's just like it's just working and it's going great. And then there's times.
And then in a moment.
No, and then, yeah, I mean, and then it just, things happen. I mean, it's nothing that we could control. It's not like, oh, how did this happen? It will always happen that one of us will be a little more busy, or we'll both be busy or more stressed, and like we'll feel less connected, or we'll get frustrated at each other. And I find that our relationship is a lot more stable when I just allow it, when I trust the process. And I'm like, it's the same thing with myself. The more I'm like, okay, I'm feeling emotional right now. I'm feeling like a wreck. I'm feeling like I can't get my life together. I'm not motivated. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Like, okay, I'm having a hard day. Like, move on. Like, I'm not perfect. I'm not God, you know, like I don't have to have it all together. I'm not like, who said I always have to be strong? But I used to think so. But when I relax into my own ebbs and flows, I feel a lot more stable. I just accept. So when we're like more disconnected, I'm like, you know what, there's something to learn from now. Like, I don't need to force it, you know, maybe we need a little more time to like do more our own introspection, or maybe it's more time, like we're less connected right now, to build my relationship with my teenage kids in the evening when the two of us are less intuitively flowing, or whatever it is. But we always come back and we always get stronger. So I think I don't know, I find that has been really helpful.
I want to add one more thing, which I think for me was very helpful, is I guess two pieces. One is the giving piece. You know, there are times where it happened tonight. I had a crazy day. I came home and Nahama needed my help with something right away. Now, in the taking part of me said, I just want to stop and just, you know, rest for 20 minutes, have a little break, and then come home, or then be present. But the giving part of me, which is what I've learned over the 15 years of marriage, is that Nahama needs my help. I'm going to give now. And I don't think I've ever been in a situation that when I've given unconditionally that I've regretted it. It takes work, and it takes digging deeper within myself to be able to give. But what ends up happening is I give, and then later when I need that space, Nechama will give back in return. And so as long as you're ready to give and give and give, your relationship will be stronger. The other piece, which for me was huge, and it's not something, people think that being an Orthodox rabbi, you have God based on where you come from. And on some level, yes, I was raised in an environment with God, but I wouldn't say that I owned God, or I had my handle on God until later in my marriage. and that being a fundamental core of falling back onto God, that ultimately God will have everything taken care of, allowed me to allow Nechama to be herself, and allowed me to let go sometimes. One of the things, I have some of my staff is on this call, so they know what I'm talking about. Is we have these Rosh Hashanah things that we've been delivering, and I had different people that were supposed to be there, and I'm not exaggerating. 4 people who each had committed all canceled out, and so suddenly it all was left on my shoulders to do it. And I ran around today. I did some of it. I got to a point where I'm like, I can't do it. But people, and I do have somebody who's hopefully who's committed to doing it tomorrow. But when you let go of me determining the outcome, it allows me to go into peace and go into Rosh Hashanah knowing we've done our best in this process, and the rest of it Hashem is taking care of. And that same concept is within our relationships. Oftentimes we think that, if we don't get our spouse to do A, B, C, or D, then the world is going to come to an end. But if we remember that, going back to that first commandment, that Hashem is there, then no matter what happens, our relationship is strong. And it's not about what I want, it's about what Hashem really wants, what God really wants.
Yeah, I know we need to wrap up, but this is the best part, just being candid and natural. I have to say one more thing about parenting that has been a big thing for us in our relationship, that obviously, like all couples, Ezzy and I come from very different homes. We have different personalities, we have different views on things, and we parent very different. I actually, after 15 years, we're finally we're both coming to the middle. I came from one extreme where it was like totally like my kids could step all over me and say what they want and do what they want, and I don't say anything. And as he's like, you open your mouth, and it's like that's the way his family grew up. And it's just been interesting. We are coming to the middle, but along the process, the best thing, I was trying to change him and be like, you can't talk that way to a kid. You have to be like me. And he's like, hello, why aren't you stepping up for yourself? Why aren't you, saying something? And the best advice we both got was like, you know what? Thank God you're happily married, but when it comes to raising kids, pretend you're divorced, because it's like, if you lived in separate homes and God forbid, your kids were bouncing back from home to home, they would know that in mom's house, they do it this way, and in dad's house, they do it that way, and they would adapt. And they're like, someone told us the same thing. It's like, if you can't agree, just, your kids will know, like when we go to mommy, she's going to handle it this way. And when we go to dad, he'll handle it this way. And this is the reaction we'll expect from him. And your kids will do a lot better, and it'll be so much better for your relationship if you do you, let him do him, and that's it. And, if I think that maybe I would let's say I think as he's not doing it in the most compassionate way, and my kids, if I do it compassionate, my kids, if they're looking for a feminine kind of compassionate way, they'll automatically come to me. So I don't need to worry. I don't need to change him. And that's been a really helpful in our relationship too, like really just not getting our kids or our parenting differences involved in the relationships, because relationships are so complicated, and bringing parenting in it could just really, it could destroy a lot, and it could bring a lot of negativity and criticism that's not helpful. So I wanted to share that. Anyways, unless you have any other questions or thoughts, it's been really fun sharing.
This is really great, and thank you both so much. I wish that we could just keep doing it, of course. It seems for all the solutions that, you've put forth, there are at least that many more problems. So it is the kind of thing, that I guess marriage counseling is made of.
I think we should, I'm actually really happy we did these two. And I know Ed and I were talking about it. It made me think that we should really do more ongoing, even if it's once a month, like evenings for couples to talk about, not only marriage, relationships, or just different, like Ezzy and I together hosting these kind of conversations for men and women. I think it's been a really nice opportunity, and I really hope to continue in different forms and different themes.
Are you going to be doing this again next week?
No. I'm sorry.
Once a month.
Next week we have, or at the end of this week, we have Rosh Hashanah. For those that we have Friday, we have the Apples and Honey event on Zoom, and Suska is going to be playing music. We should get Mordecai too, because both of you guys are a team. What's it called? Hot Cookles or something?
Yes.
And then Shabbat, we have services for the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Outside. Sunday, we're going to have shofar in the park. And then we go on for another week, and then we have Yom Kippur and Sukkot. So we'll have a whole bunch of different things going on. But we're always available if you have any questions.
Yeah.
So don't be shy.
And we both do spiritual counseling and coaching one-on-one if you ever need.
So
We're here.
I just also want to say that, what's really, really nice about this is that out of it, the whole long day, this is the first time today, if not even however many times this week, where we get to just be together,
Same here.
Yes, it's true. Well, to be continued. Tamara and Karen are both here, and they work for us, with us. And so Tamara, you went off for a couple minutes, but we were speaking about continuing ongoing, like Ezzy and I doing kind of like adults, for men and women, different topics and discussions, because this was a really great idea. So we'll continue it. We'll keep doing it.
Great.
All right. Shana Tova, everybody.
Shana Tova.
May 5781 be a great year of health and meaning for everybody.
And renewed relationships. That we should our relationships should be exactly the up and down of exactly the way it's supposed to be. The imperfectly perfect.
All righty.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
night. Shana Tova.
Bye.
Shana Tova.
Bye-bye.